Good morning and welcome. My name is Gregory Baruso. I'm the chair of the City of Federal Way Diversity Commission. On behalf of the City of Federal Way Diversity Commission, the City of Federal Way, in partnership with Federal Way School District, Federal Way High School, and the Black Student Union, I welcome you to the 2018 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. Although this is the 7th annual partnership with Federal Way School District, this will be the Diversity Commission's 17th year and the City of Federal Way's 25th year in celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King. As in past years, 2018's tribute to Dr. King began last Friday with Federal Way High School's school assembly, continued on Saturday with the citywide food drive, and concludes here today at our incredible Performing Arts Event Center. Each year, the Commission asks for a participating school to come up with a celebration theme. As you can see, today's theme is every vision needs a voice. Think about this. How fitting of a theme for today with all the controversies and criticisms that we have all faced this past year. Let me ask this. Has Dr. King's belief in mankind and the human spirit been lost? In somewhat desperate times, are you willing to help others? As you ponder an answer, I'd like to first share 2 stories that happened on Saturday's food drive and why I believe Dr. King's legacy of kindness to others are present in our great city today. One gentleman didn't donate food, but instead walked up to one of our volunteers and said, "I will give you everything I have in my pockets, money-wise, for the event." He then fished out $70 in bills and then went through his pockets and took all his change out and gave his change till they were empty. Another woman, poorly dressed, first donated $1, then reached into her bag that had 4 cans of tuna fish in it and took 2 cans out and donated to the event. These are the actions that Dr. King spoke and lived his life by. These are the actions of strangers helping others, but most of all, these are the citizens of Federal Way. You see, whether you agree with me or not, it is my belief that Dr. King's spirit will guide our actions each and every day. For many of us, including myself, this is a day off. So you all come here, you're out of school, I'm off of work. But you know, I know you've heard that this is really a day on. In 1994, the United States Congress passed the King Holiday and Service Act, designating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday as a National Day of Service. This is a call for Americans to work together to find solutions for national problems. This day of service is meant to empower individuals, strengthen our communities, and bridge barriers, moving us closer to Dr. King's vision of the beloved community. For the next hour or so, you'll be witness to our beloved community celebrating Dr. King's vision and voice through speakers and performers. I hope you enjoyed today's program, but when you leave here today, I'd like for each and every one of you to think of what you saw here, but most of all, what your visions of a beloved community is to you and how you will use your voice to see these visions come true. Thank you. So I know this is a gathering and celebration, so I had to mention, like everyone else, we all have cell phones. So if you could please silence your phones, put them on vibrate, we appreciate it. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker. The person has become a voice for the Federal Way School Board's vision of our schools becoming the paradigm for school districts not only in the region, but in Washington State. She became the district's leader in 2015, hitting the ground running, and she hasn't stopped. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our Federal Way School District Superintendent, Dr. Tammy Campbell.
Thank you, Greg. I want to first of all acknowledge the City of Federal Way, the Diversity Commission. I'd like to thank the team at Federal Way High School and the administration who helped to organize this in partnership with the city. Any scholars in the audience from Federal Way Public Schools, will you give me a big shout out? I need to know where you are. And I want to also extend a welcome to the larger community city officials. Thank you for being here today. I've been sort of toying with what it was that I wanted to say, and when I thought about the theme of my comments today, the theme that really resonated with me was this idea of when the good people are silent. I want you to think about that. When the good people are silent. You know, I love movies and a good story in which the good guy prevails over evil, filled with courage, conviction, and a strong sense of doing the right thing. The good guy is the antidote for the bad actions of a few. One movie in particular that resounded with me, and I'm going to age myself, I risk that, I know, but this is the movie, was a Western I watched as a little girl. It was called Shane. In the movie, Shane, the main character, throws in his lot with the family and a group of settlers who are being persecuted by some pretty bad men who control the town. Shane acted when it was hard, when he was alone, and when he could have just ridden out of town and not given a care, but he didn't. I love this movie so much that I named my son Shane. It's from that movie. Well, I tell you today, we need the good people to find their voice and their action. Because as I think about the mood across our country today, the state of our country and the level of connectedness, equity, opportunity, and sense of justice for all human beings today, I have to tell you I am hopeful, but I'm also disappointed. I believe we are at a point where we must decide if we are serious about living out our ideals of democracy, specifically the ideals of liberty, equality, opportunity, access, justice, or are we somehow addicted to participating in the show where we attend annual ceremonies like this and we talk about Dr. Martin Luther King and what he did on a day, and on the other days we retreat to our camps, our parties, our affiliations, our groups, our tribes, our comfort zone, and we either work in direct opposition to what Dr. King fought for, or we remain indifferent and silent to those who do. On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King made his historic I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington. In 1963, when he made that speech, white and black people drank from different water fountains. They went to segregated schools, segregated restaurants, workplaces. There were lynchings and pernicious Jim Crow laws in many states. Racism was vivid and easy to call out and name. In some ways back then, though, it was easy to stand back and say, that's bad, I'm not bad, I'm one of the good people. You could watch in horror and clear judgment about where you stood. But I want you to think about this. Today, our human creations, and I say this, human creations, designed to divide us and isolate power and wealth with a few, these human creations like racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, classism, religious oppression, they are much more subtle and in some ways more dangerous. They lull us into this comfort zone that everything's okay. You see, the acts in the 60s didn't just appear, or the 50s or the 40s. They grew out of small acts, thoughts, beliefs, and the little things that were enabled, promoted, ignored, minimized, explained away, and ultimately allowed to grow into overt and unacceptable acts like segregations, beatings, lynchings, gas chambers, discrimination, and other forms of overt violence and nonviolence. It boils down to this: what will the good people of this community, this country, this state, this county do in the face of bad actions that are aimed to minimize, diminish, and marginalize others? I want to repeat that. What will the good people of this community, Federal Way, do to minimize the bad actions that may harm some of our fellow human beings? What thoughts and beliefs do you hold about other people, especially people you don't interact with very often? Do you see their humanity, their right to life, their liberty, their pursuit of happiness? Do you help to further that? To the good people, I say, what do you do when you hear comments that open the window to racist beliefs and actions? Do you nod, laugh, agree, or remain silent? If you said yes to any of the above, you have enabled injustice to prevail. Are you going to be the person who destroys the seed before it grows into the plant that hurts your fellow human beings? Are you going to be the person who points at these vile acts later and say, "Oh, that was bad"? When Martin Luther King said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends," he was trying to convey the power each of us has to make a powerful and positive difference in the world. You know, us, the good people. He wasn't silent during the Birmingham campaign aimed at ending discriminatory economic policies. He wasn't silent during the Montgomery bus boycott aimed at ending racial segregation. He wasn't silent during the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. He wasn't silent during Bloody Sunday on Selma in an effort to gain voting rights for disenfranchised Black voters. You know about the speech, but the man was busy every day acting in opposition to these things. Well, Martin Luther King is no longer here, yet injustice continues. I want to circle back now to how I started. I think the reason that characters like Shane resonate with us is because we want to believe we would do the same thing. And if not the same thing, we would do something. So, to you, the good people, I say, where do you stand in supporting DACA? Where do you stand as we see a growing number of hate crimes? Where do you stand on the demonization of an entire religious group? Where do you stand when an entire group of people are deemed not worthy of the American dream? I know where Dr. King would have stood. The question is, will each of us take the baton and make a stand? If we are to live out his dream, the good people, you must not be silent. You will have to think, speak, and act bravely. Our very future depends on it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Vera. I am a junior at Federal Way High School, and I will be your host today. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Campbell for taking time out of her day to be here. It is very special to us. Also, I'd like to announce our first performance from Federal Way High School's Latino Club. As one of the largest minority groups that go unrepresented, their vision today is to showcase the many layers of their culture and inspire pride and unity in all of our communities. Please give them a very warm welcome. Our next speaker is someone who needs no introduction. Please give a hand clap to Mayor Farrell.
Welcome. It's my honor to be here. Let's give the Latino Club another round of applause. Wasn't that great? Before I get started on my comments, I did want to acknowledge some of our elected officials here that helped make this happen. We've got several of the city council members here. We've got Deputy Mayor Honda. Let's give her a big round of applause. An individual we're going to hear from in a few minutes, Councilmember Jesse Johnson. Councilmember Hong Tran. And Councilmember Martin Moore. Also, I'll get into this in a few minutes, but let's give the Diversity Commission of Federal Way and the Black Student Union a big round of applause. Thank you. It is a great honor to be here today, and it's great to see this beautiful facility. You know, while the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., like many of our national holidays, has been repositioned for many years to create a long weekend, it's nevertheless that today is Dr. King's actual 89th birthday. Furthermore, the year 2018 marks the 50-year anniversary of the tragic and violent death of Dr. King by an assassin's bullet on April 4th of 1968, when he was not even 40 years old. It's hard to imagine. Now, for many of us, myself included, this shocking and history-making event occurred when our conscious memories hadn't even begun yet. For today's high school students, it occurred long before you were born. It is indeed the way of the world that important events fade into history. Fewer and fewer people remain with a first-hand memory of those events until eventually the historical record is all that remains. It is therefore urgent and important for all of us on this 50-year anniversary of his death to recall and reflect upon the meaning of the life of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Now, the theme for today's event is Every Vision Needs a Voice. What was the vision of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and who are his voices today? Now, the vision of Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend King's vision was one of justice. He was fond of quoting the Bible, particularly Amos chapter 5, verse 24. Quote, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Justice is the essence, as Dr. King made clear in his 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail, of a, quote, "positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality." I have to add that as a former deputy prosecutor for King County, I agree with Dr. King's assertion that in his letter that, quote, "law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice." Dr. King recognized the essential value of America was freedom. Quote, "We will reach," he wrote in the letter, "the goal in freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation because the goal of America is freedom. We will win our freedom," he went on, "because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands." Dr. King also began his I Have a Dream speech, considered by most scholars the very best speech of the last 20th century, with a recognition that the August 28, 1963 March on Washington would, quote, "go down in history as the greatest demonstration of freedom in the history of our nation, if not the world." Dr. King had a vision of love and nonviolence. Quote, "Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom," he said on that summer day, "by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred." A force that he described in his letter from a Birmingham jail as coming, quote, "perilously close to advocating violence." "We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence," he said in I Have a Dream. Instead, he longed for the day, as he concluded in his letter from a Birmingham jail, "for the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." The next year, when accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, he concluded that being given the prestigious award was a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral question of our time. The need for man to overcome, men and women, to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Dr. King was at the same time the epitome of courage in the face of adversity, condemning in his letter from a Birmingham jail those who have been more cautious than courageous, while recognizing the courage of those who were non-violently sitting in at lunch counters and willing to go to jail for conscience sake. Indeed, he himself was one of those courageous people, though he was too modest to say so himself. But he did recognize when accepting the Nobel Peace Prize that his abiding faith in America and audacious faith in the future of mankind gave him courage to face the uncertainties of the future. Speaking in Memphis, Tennessee, only one day before he was brutally gunned down by an assassin, he was not intimidated by threats he knew were out there. He was fearless. His final words read like an Old Testament prophecy. And if you have not seen this speech, I would call on each and every one of you to Google that, look it up, and see it. I'll do my best to summarize some of those poignant words in that speech. He said, "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the top of the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not be there or get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm so happy tonight. I am not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Poignant. Almost his last words. Today's voices for King's vision. Who are those voices for Dr. King's vision? I would submit to you that the sponsors of this event, the City of Federal Way Diversity Commission, the Federal Way Public Schools, and the Federal Way High School Black Student Union carry on Dr. King's message here locally. Representing Dr. King's vision of justice and love, the City of Federal Way Diversity Commission has as its mission to ensure Federal Way is a community that is united amidst diversity, where each individual is equally respected, valued, needed, and cherished. It is a matter of great pride to me that I serve as mayor for one of the most diverse cities of its size in our nation. Over 100 languages are spoken in our school district. Over one-third of the people over 5 years old in our city speak a language other than English at home. About one-third of our city residents are Asian American, African American, or Hispanic American. This diversity is represented on our own city council, 3 of whose 7 members were born in 3 different foreign countries, and 3 of whose members are Asian or African American. And yet we have an unrivaled unity of purpose to continue making our community a better place for us all. We are the epitome of our national motto, E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many, one. See, it's really woven into the fabric of what we call America and what we love. In today's world, education is the key to fully taking part in the American dream. In that sense, the Federal Way Public Schools and the Federal Way High School Black Student Union represent Dr. King's vision of freedom as our nation's ultimate goal. And who better represents Dr. King's vision of courage than our own superintendent, Tammy Campbell? She has fearlessly fought for equity, another word for justice, even when the road has seemed rough and the path not clear, such as in her recent successful effort on the bond measure for every person in this community. In conclusion, as I said at the start, it is up to all of us to reflect on this national holiday, on the meaning of Dr. King's life. It is really up to all of us to carry on his great mission, to be continued voices for his vision. Thank you for the sponsors of this program for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And as Reverend Dr. King would have wished, may God continue to bless our beautiful city of Federal Way, our great state of Washington, and the United States of America. Thank you.
Next up is a very heartfelt performance from Unity. Our next speaker is a former Federal Way School District admin who was honored by President Obama when she was in office in Federal Way District. She has been working in and around schools for the past 27 years and was the first Black woman to run for statewide office. please recognize Aaron Jones.
Salam, marhaba, dobre utram, goedemorgen, guten tag, bonjour, buenos dias. Welcome today. I figure if we're going to talk about vision and voices, let's hear some voices. I feel incredibly blessed to be here today. This is my 5th Federal Way City celebration of Dr. King's birthday. And as most of you know, I don't live here. I live in Olympia. But I come every year because this is home. You know, I had not seen the agenda to see who was speaking today, and as I looked at the agenda, every single person speaking is someone that I have a connection to. Some of you in the school district don't know this, but Dr. Campbell was my boss in Spokane many years ago. There's incredible irony in that we are together again. The mayor and I have been friends a long time. Jesse and I worked together in his campaign. Martin Moore, who will also be speaking, has been a friend and worked in AmeriCorps here. And so I just feel really blessed, all the staff that are out here today that I know, I feel really blessed to be able to be part of this community. And especially on a day like today, my husband got to preach at our church yesterday on Dr. King's vision and making it real. This for me is assembly number 11 in the last 5 days. I have literally been in every corner of this state. I will have spoken to 15,000 kids in 13 days on Dr. King's birthday. And as I think about traveling our state and talking with young people and adults alike about his vision and his purpose, there are a couple of things that have struck me as I was preparing for this season. This is my busiest season of speaking. When I lost my election by 1%, by the way. There's nothing like that. I'm a ball player. Losing 99 to 100 that stinks. That's not a fun way to lose. But here's what I'll tell you, and it's a lesson that I believe Dr. King embraced. Sometimes getting knocked down propels you to a greater thing. And I have, in the last year since I lost my election, spoken to 100,000 kids across the country. And I think about that because I want to challenge especially young people to realize that losing is only lost when you don't learn from it. And that every door that closes, there's something else that's about to open for you. And if you never dare to do great things, you'll never accomplish great things. Loss is part of that. And as I thought about going out and presenting to young people across our state over the next 2 weeks, I have been stricken by this notion that often we think of Dr. King's birthday as a black holiday, and it is not a black holiday. Dr. King is a black man, but he's not just a black hero, he's an American hero. This is an American holiday. And I say that because, you know, as a black woman who travels our state talking about Dr. King, when I first began doing this 10 years ago, I actually kind of resented it because I didn't want to be that black lady perpetuating this notion that this is just about black people. But I realized even 10 years ago, it gave me an open door to get in and challenge young people to think about how do we not just do this day, check the box, how do we live his legacy? And so every year when I get out in my car and drive miles and miles and miles, hours in a day, I want to challenge us to think about living out his legacy. Not only is this not just a black holiday, but I believe we have so much further to go. As I think about the context of the United States we live in right now, I came to America in 1989 for college. I came having studied black history from abroad. I grew up in Europe and came to America expecting to go back to Europe again after I got a law degree. I was going to go save the world from the United Nations World Court. And realized as a 19-year-old in college, after being called the N-word so many times I stopped counting, on a college campus that right next door was a cricket club, and it said under the sign for the cricket club, "No coloreds or Jews allowed here," in 1989. By the way, the sign didn't come down until 2012. As I reminisce about my first year of college when I seriously considered suicide, And then my encounter on a basketball court at 19 years old, just after my 19th birthday, I encountered 4 young black boys who had given up on school. They'd given up on life. In fact, all 4 of these young men said, I have nothing to dream for. Why would I dream when I don't expect to live to be 21? It was on that basketball court that I found my dream. I found my vision. And I knew at 19 years old I had been made black and white, American and European, a baller and an academic for a reason. And I made a decision at 19 years old, I am going to save the world one kid at a time as a champion for kids. And so as I think about his legacy today, I want to challenge especially our young people to think about 3 ways that you can use your voice and think about his legacy in a way that you will live it out. Because right now, America needs your voices. Just like Dr. Campbell said, there are lots of good people who are absolutely silent right now. And I dare us all to use our voices in a way that matters. And so there are 3 life lessons or leadership lessons that I believe Dr. King embodied in his lifetime. And I want to share those with you, and then share a quote that motivates me, that I read as a 15-year-old, the first year that Dr. King's birthday was celebrated. It was 1986, and I was 15 years old. It was my first MLK speech. And I want to end my speech today by going back to a quote I read. I'm 46 now, so I read at 15 years old. Lesson number 1, young people, take advantage of your education. Dr. King had graduated from high school by 14, was starting college at 15. And one of the things that breaks my heart, I have played basketball in 14 countries, I've played soccer in 14 countries, some in Western Europe, some in South America, some third world where there was no electricity or running water. And one of the things that I find unique about the United States, having taught in Philadelphia and then South Bend, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, Tacoma, Spokane, I hear far too many kids in the United States say this: I have to go to school. Man, I gotta go to school. And I say to you, you get to go to school. You get to go to school for free. And it pains me that because it is free and because we have to go, that far too many of our young people are showing up and doing time. And so I say to you, young people, if you gotta be in school 6 hours of the day, 5 days a week, make it count. Use the system to get something out of it. And so you have a dream, use the school system to make your dream a reality, and don't just do time. Dr. King was in a segregated system with passed down books, and yet he used the system to become his best version. And I dare you to do that. The second lesson that I believe he would dare us to is to say yes to opportunities. Say yes to opportunities that are bigger than yourself. When I was 29 years old, we had just taken in a little girl in our house. She was the daughter of a Hilltop Crip, black gang in Tacoma. Her mom dropped her off at our house, and I took a year off of playing basketball to take care of this little girl. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old already. She was 2, so 1, 2, 3. I said, yeah, we don't have time for basketball this year. And so I took a year off of basketball, and at 29 years old, I got a call from the Seattle Storm. And they said, is this Aaron Jones? Yes, it is. Who are you? This is the Seattle Storm. We have an open tryout. We heard you're a baller. We'd like to invite you to try out. And before I could even think, I said yes. I was 29 with 3 small children. This is not wise. But I said yes. And that would lead me on a journey to try out, not just for 1 team, but for 2 teams. I had to push my body in ways that I could not have imagined. I discovered muscles I did not know I had. And it stretched me. And I didn't make either of the WNBA teams I tried out for. In fact, I made NBA Live for being the oldest woman with the most children at tryouts. But what it did lead me to, I had an Olympian, a former Olympian, on the very first women's Olympic team invite me to try out, to play as the player captain against the Mexican Olympic team. And at 30 years old, I got to represent the United States and play against the Mexican Olympic team and share my personal story in Spanish at halftime in an auditorium of about 10,000 people. That would prepare me to run for office 15 years later. And so here's what I would say to you young people. There are opportunities that are presented to you every day, and you say, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. And I would say to you, you're not, but step into it, Because stepping into that challenging space is what will stretch you to become the best version of yourself. And say yes. Dr. King said yes to being the face of the civil rights movement before he even understood what the civil rights movement was. And so say yes. And the last challenge I would put before you is right now, especially right now, choose love in the face of hate. Dr. King was the king of choosing love and mercy and grace in the face of hate and judgment. And so I dare you to choose love and grace and mercy. And young people, especially on social media, I am watching, I've had 3 people commit suicide in my life in the last 2 weeks. And all 3 connected to things that were said on social media. And I would dare you young people to use your thumbs for good and not evil. Sometimes the courageous thing is to not use your thumbs at all. Sometimes the courageous thing is when you see someone else destroying the character of someone you know, to stand in and use your voice. But right now, in the face of sometimes national leaders, sometimes local leaders, and the hate that is spewed, I need us to stand up and say, no, I refuse to be part of the hate. I stand for love, and love is a choice, and love is an action. It's not a mushy feeling, it's a choice of how we treat people. And I'm going to close with my favorite quote, and dare you to stand up for something. Again, education, critical. 2, say yes to opportunities, and 3, choose love in the face of hate. This is a quote that Martin Luther King shared 1 year before he was assassinated, and it goes like this. You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you're afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you'll be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that someone will stab you or shoot at you or bomb your house, and so you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your body is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. And so I dare us, young and old, educator, city staff, community member, I dare us to be willing to live for something in such a way that we're willing to die for it, to make our voices count, because every single voice in this room matters. Thank you.
Our last student performance will be a traditional Siva Samoa dance from PI Club.
Olea, mulenu sa babaw Iyang mga loay sa lahat sinilaw Nawafiyong ay likay sa'yo Lahat sa manapafala Sofia malunga Sang aluluwe machoy Fortu moria Let's my letter Let's Angile machangi angile 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 lunga angile lalo angile fora Angile machangi angile 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 lunga angile lalo angile fora Let's my letter Let's Salale madong Let's Let's my letter Let's Salale madong Let's Angile machangi angile 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 lunga angile lalo angile fora Angile machangi angile 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 lunga angile lalo angile fora Value lela Luma tawa piati Wachua na iatu Voine lela Value lela Luma tawa piati Wachua na iatu Voine lela
Our next speaker is as resilient as he is inspiring. Please welcome Councilman Jesse Johnson.
Good morning. I said good morning. Talofa to my PI brothers and sisters in the crowd today. First of all, thank you to the Diversity Commission and the Federal High School Black Student Union for inviting me to speak today. Giving all honor to God, I would like to also acknowledge that we are on Duwamish land. I would also like to thank my parents who sacrificed so much for me to be here today. Please stand to be recognized. I would like to begin by reciting a poem, one of my favorite poems of all time, in spoken word fashion, as the young people call it, because I believe this poem embodies what Dr. King stood for. Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be in my unconscionable soul. In the failed clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horrors of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. I would like to begin by drawing attention to the theme of today's event. Every vision needs a voice. This theme is indeed an important one. It calls us to attend to what we understand as a vision, which is not merely an expression of grievances, but a full illustration of one's aspiration towards the development of our shared independent humanity. But it also calls on to attend the words needs a voice, in that it challenges us to recognize that no human is truly without a voice. But what those voices demand is an audience. a body of people willing to listen and thus act. But perhaps above all, this title calls us to move towards turning theory into reality, a reality shaped by every vision. And yet, as Dr. King knew and addressed so well, theory is different than outcome. When put into practice, not every vision actually receives a voice, just not as all hard work receives the American dream. The rhetoric of personal responsibility has led to the invisibility of profound structural and institutional barriers for many people to reach that American dream, that mountaintop that Dr. King talked about. When we attempt any colorblind approach or any non-equity focused approach towards turning into collective visions into reality, the visions and voices of many groups become subordinated in the periphery. We have learned since the time of Dr. King that any algorithm for altering society that disregards the element of equity produces inequity. So I ask you, brothers and sisters, how can we sincerely echo the words of the great Dr. King that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, amidst a time in which so many of our fellow humans are suffering from an absence of justice? An absence of justice always stems from a neglect of the voices who suffer disproportionately in our society. When so many are languishing from uncared mental health in the loneliest shadows of our communities, there is an absence of justice. When we have children in some schools that lavished with resources and high technology while children in nearby schools have tattered textbooks, sparse resources, and worn-out classroom, there is an absence of justice. When there is a pipeline from early schooling to the prison system, there is an absence of justice. When black and brown males go incarcerated and gunned down in the streets, there is an absence of justice. When we have widespread mistrust between those who govern and those who are governed, those who police and those who are policed, there is an absence of justice. When fellow humans are living in squalor and homelessness, in the darkest corners of invisibility, there is an absence of justice. When women, children, and immigrants and the LGBTQ community exist in a perpetual state of fear, there is an absence of justice. When we see the intolerance of diversity and difference on the national display and in the news every single day, there is an absence of justice. And when the people's opinion no longer shapes the very policies that shape our lives, there is an absence of justice. But by saying so has remained controversial. Even with all these years since the time of Dr. King, to say that some are left behind in a society wherein some believe that the myth that hard work is all you need for social mobility, safety, and prosperity is to challenge the master narrative and the powers that be. But Dr. King warned us against becoming well-adjusted to injustice. He warned us that settling into silence and indifference in the face of injustice is wrong. Towards the end of his life, he grew increasingly conscious and increasingly forthright that the only path towards true equality is actually true equity. Addressing inequity, that is, hearing out the voices of those most downtrodden, requires a change in our collective consciousness, or rather a return to an earlier ethos, an ethos that cherishes the collective good and not only individual gain. To allow this change is to become emboldened with our speech because we must first address reality before we can redress reality. To alter it or to recreate new structures and institutions that are fair and just. And this begins, brothers and sisters, with an imagination of what it means to be an agent of justice. So I read to you, as Dr. Campbell did previously, the words of the late, great Dr. King. In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Thank you, Dr. Campbell, for speaking those words of wisdom. Thank you, Mayor Farrell, for speaking your truth, and for Aaron Jones for being so passionate in your speeches. That is what we need. Today, I'm calling for a far more radical change in our collective consciousness, a commitment to hope and justice in our communities, and to remember that justice is not a spectator sport. You cannot simply stand on the sidelines, but you must be willing to take a stand and speak out. I'm calling for a radical grip on love towards our neighbors of all colors, creeds, financial situations, sexual orientations, and countries of origin. I'm calling for a rebellion against apathy, indifference, and injustice. I'm calling for us to move towards empathy, where we put people in equity and safety and justice first. Because we are indeed one family, right? The human family. So I end with this. Let us continue the legacy of Dr. King to think critically and use our voices to confront biases, disrupt stereotypes, and end the status quo. Because nothing can stop the power of a committed and a determined people when we truly want to do good. We can become agents of justice like Dr. King and transform our communities if we just speak out when we see something wrong and put an end to it. These are the things that Dr. King envisioned in his dream. So what are you going to do about it? Thank you, and God bless.
Now, last but definitely not least is Councilman Martin Moore.
This is my first time on stage here. Oop. So make this my size here. First, allow me to begin by introducing myself. I am Martin Moore, and I am proud and humbled to continue to serve as your city council member for this great city of Federal Way. I want to say thank you to the Diversity Commission for your support of this endeavor, for Chairman Greg Barusso's relentless commitment in making this award, the Representative Roger Freeman Memorial Award, come into fruition, and for Dr. Tammy Campbell's for seeing the value of this award. Thank you. So here we are on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a day that reunites us as Americans and empowers us to reignite our call to action for equality, for justice, and for the ability for all of us to come together and not just to build each other up, but to celebrate the gifts and the talents that we have been watching during this celebration. Let's hear it for everyone for their What we've seen today is what makes our communities special and powerful. What we have experienced today at this and this past Friday during the MLK Assembly at Federal Way High School, the talents and the gifts of you, the students, is what makes our community powerful and simply inspirational. It's truly amazing to feel the power of the youth. Take the true pride of your heritage. So why am I here? You see, I've had the honor and the absolute greatest privilege of working with Representative Roger Freeman when he was our state representative. I've also worked on his city council race that took place prior to his legislative campaign. I had the gift of being in his presence where he taught me to love people for who they are, to celebrate one another, to advocate for justice and equality. That's who Roger was. He was a man who lifted our youth and families up just like Martin Luther King Jr. did. I've seen it, and families around King County have witnessed it. In fact, one student that Roger gave a presentation to said, he seemed very eager to meet us and that we felt welcome. The warmest reception we got all afternoon. He was very respectful, and I knew he was actually receiving what we were telling him. Roger cared for people. He spread his compassion towards others and loved life to the fullest. In fact, he loved life so much that even through his struggle with cancer, people weren't even aware of it. Roger had the gift of lifting a whole room up whenever he walked into one. You see, we remember his smile. It was just contagious. These were the talents and the gifts that he had for our community. He inspired us to do great things in our society, and again, to celebrate each other. Our world is changing, and that's an understatement. We live in very complex times. You see, the older I become, the more I notice the negativity, the mudslinging in politics that has become the norm. Our society has become cynical and far too complacent. But we, as a city, can use this day to reignite the call to change the culture of how we interact with each other and mold the principles of what MLK championed for during his life. So while we may disagree with one another, let us recognize the differences of our opinions, but find the respect for one another and love us. Let us listen to each other with the purpose of understanding, and let us tear down barriers so that we can find common ground. Let us find the opportunities to work together to make our society compassionate towards each other, celebrate one another, build each other up, and let us come together to inspire the next generation to lead with compassion and with unity. You see, that's what this award is about. It is about fostering leaders within our youth that recognizes the importance of what has been said today. We want to be a community that continues to build our youth up and equip them for the world that they're going to inherit. This award recognizes young leaders that stand up for justice, advocate for inclusion through diversity, and show humility and concerns of our most vulnerable through compassion, and always being honest, truthful, and living your life with integrity. It is with great pleasure that I announce the finalist for the second Representative Roger Freeman Memorial Award, and will you please join me, Miss Aaliyah Baruso. I would also like to invite Mayor Jim Farrell and Dr. Tammy Campbell up to the stage. Thank you. Let's hear for them. I have to say that this year's recipient holds a very special place in my heart. I've gotten to know Aaliyah through her parents, Greg and Sean Baruso. I rest assured that Chairman Greg Baruso did recuse himself from the process during this election for this award. You see, these people hold a special place in my heart because the very last campaign, Greg and Roger were standing together. It's not only a picture that I have in my mind, but it's in talking with the parents, I can tell you that they are true people that live up to the type of man that Roger was. You see, they are the parents that instilled the gifts to their kids and Aaliyah. Aaliyah is one of those quiet leaders, but makes a ripple of effect. She is compassionate. She lives her life with integrity, and in reading her application, she has fought for justice in her own ways. So in closing, before I give this award with the mayor of Federal Way and the superintendent of the Federal Way Public Schools, I do want to close and say that, and let us continue to build a great city that is compassionate of one another and honoring our youth for their leadership. Thank you so much for your time. And Ms. Aaliyah. I do want to say that this award. Oh, we're going picture time. I also have to take the time to thank, before Aaliyah will share a few words, I have to thank, again, I want to thank the commission for your relentless work and support of this effort, because Roger, like many other people, are people that shouldn't be forgotten in our community. And I have to say thank you to the mayor and for my colleagues. This award, and I will read it, Representative Roger Freeman's life embodies one of unselfishness and kindness. Roger served the citizens of Federal Way through these 4 outstanding characteristics: justice, diversity, integrity, and compassion. He was a City of Federal Way Human Services Commissioner, a council member, and a Washington State Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore, the City of Federal Way School Board, and the Diversity Commission. I also want to thank my family for their endless support, but especially my parents for teaching me the importance of giving back and making sure I always know my future has no limits. I had the privilege of meeting Representative Roger Freeman when my dad ran for state legislator. It was hard for me because he was always gone doing things for his campaign, but knowing that he and Mr. Freeman would be making a difference made it worth it. Representative Freeman made such a difference in our community, and I hope all of us can strive to do the same. Thank you.
As we wrap up, I want to acknowledge this is really a partnership. And when you think about the school district, often folks will reference the superintendent, but I couldn't do this work without a dynamic school board. And I've got to tell you, our school board is serious about equity. I would like Director and Board President Claire Wilson and Director Eto to please stand. And I want to really thank you for living out what we talk about today in terms of opportunity for all of our scholars. Please stand and be recognized. Thank you.
We'd like to thank our Federal Way High School students for their art submissions: Jasmine Pope, Madeline Rice, Madeline DeRoque, Fernando Lopez, Maria Benitez, and Leo Ramirez. Thank you. Union.
I'm Cheris Ray, and I'm Vice President of the Black Student Union.
I'm Estelle Yusuf. I'm the Secretary of BSU.
My name is Eden Bayana, and I'm the historian.
So first off, we would like to thank the City Council members for blessing BSU with this amazing opportunity to host this annual celebration of MLK. We would also like to thank Superintendent Campbell, Mayor Farrell, Aaron Jones, and of course Jesse Johnson for coming to speak for us. Let's give a big round of applause. And then let's give a big round of applause for our entertainment forte, also known as Latino Club, Unity, and our very own Pacific Islander Club. It takes a lot of courage to get up here and share a piece of your culture that some might not know the importance behind it, but y'all still did it, so good job. And last but not least, we would love to thank all of you, because with you, we wouldn't have a reason to put this show to honor Dr. King. And thank you guys for waking up at like 10 a.m. to come. And with that, Federal Way High School, BSU, thanks you. And make sure you guys, before you guys leave, go enjoy the refreshments out there. And you guys are dismissed. Bye, guys.